Imagine it's the dead of night in 18th century London. The city is shrouded in fog. The cobblestone streets are slick with rain, and the only sounds are the distant cry of a night watchman and the scraping of a shovel against damp earth. This wasn't a scene from a horror novel. This was a nightly reality. Welcome to the grim, fascinating world of Britain's grave robbing industry. So, why were people digging up the dead? The answer is simple: science. The dawn of modern medicine in the 1700s and 1800s created an insatiable demand for human bodies. Medical schools were booming, and aspiring doctors and surgeons needed to understand anatomy, but there was a huge problem. The law at the time only permitted the dissection of executed criminals. With crime rates fluctuating and the number of medical students skyrocketing, the supply just couldn't meet the demand. This legal bottleneck created a lucrative, albeit gruesome, black market. Enter the resurrectionists, or as the public called them, the body snatchers. These weren't ghouls or monsters. They were often desperate men from the lower classes looking for a way to make a quick buck. A fresh corpse could fetch as much as 10 guineas, a small fortune back then, equivalent to several months' wages for a common laborer. It was risky work, but the reward was too tempting to ignore. So how did they do it? It was a craft honed through practice and necessity. A typical snatching team consisted of 2 or 3 men. They'd scout a freshly dug grave during the day, often posing as mourners to get a good look at the layout. They'd return at night, armed with wooden shovels to muffle the sound, ropes, and sacks. They wouldn't dig up the entire coffin. That would take too long and make too much noise. Instead, they'd dig a small hole at the head of the grave. Then, using a crowbar, they'd deep pry open the coffin lid just enough to loop a rope around the deceased's neck or under their arms. With a grim tug of war, they would pull the body out of its final resting place. An interesting point of law made their job slightly less risky. A dead body couldn't legally be owned by anyone. So, technically, stealing a corpse wasn't a felony. The real crime was stealing the property in the grave, like the coffin, the clothes, or any jewelry. That's why resurrectionists were meticulous about stripping the body bare and leaving all possessions behind. If caught, they could claim they were only taking ownerless goods, often resulting in a lesser charge like trespassing. It was a legal loophole they exploited to the fullest. The public, however, was terrified and outraged. The thought of a loved one's final rest being so violently disturbed was a universal fear. Families went to extreme lengths to protect their dead. They'd hire armed guards to watch over fresh graves. They'd place heavy stone slabs over the coffins. Some even installed intricate iron cages called mort safes around the graves. You can still see some of these in old churchyards across Britain, silent testaments to a time of widespread fear. Wealthier families built heavily fortified mausoleums, making it nearly impossible for snatchers to get in. But for the poor, whose graves were often in shallow, unprotected plots, they were the easiest targets, highlighting the stark class divides of the era. The medical establishment had a complicated relationship with the resurrectionists. Publicly, they condemned the practice, but privately, they were the ones funding the entire operation. Surgeons and anatomy lecturers depended on a steady supply of fresh subjects for their demonstrations. Without them, medical education would grind to a halt. Some famous anatomists of the day, like Sir Astley Cooper, had direct dealings with notorious gangs of body snatchers. They would arrange drop-off points and payment schedules, turning a blind eye to the grim origins of their research material. It was a necessary evil, a dark secret at the heart of medical progress. This tension between public horror and medical necessity reached its boiling point with the infamous Burke and Hare murders in Edinburgh in 1828. William Burke and William Hare were untraditional body snatchers. They decided to skip the digging part altogether. Instead, they started murdering people lodgers, drifters, anyone who wouldn't be missed, and sold their bodies directly to the anatomist Dr. Robert Knox. They smothered their victims to avoid leaving marks on the bodies, a technique that became known as burking. When their crimes were discovered, it caused a national scandal. The public was horrified to learn that people were being murdered for dissection. The case revealed just how desperate the medical schools had become, and the dark lengths some were willing to go to. The outcry was so immense that it forced Parliament to act. The story of Burke and Hare demonstrated that the existing system was not only morally bankrupt, but was actively creating a market for murder. The government's response was the Anatomy Act of 1832. This landmark piece of legislation effectively ended the trade of the resurrectionists. The act made it legal for medical schools to dissect unclaimed bodies from workhouses and hospitals, the bodies of the very poor. While this was a controversial solution, as it disproportionately affected the destitute, it provided a legitimate legal supply of cadavers for the first time. The demand that had fueled the grave-robbing industry vanished overnight. The era of the body snatcher was over. Looking back, the story of Britain's resurrectionists is a complex one. It's a tale of desperation, scientific ambition, and social inequality. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth that many of the medical advancements we take for granted today were built upon a foundation of unethical, illegal, and often gruesome practices. The knowledge that saves lives in the 21st century was, in part, purchased from the hands of men who stalked cemeteries in the dead of night, armed with shovels and a distinct lack of scruples. The iron morgue safes that still stand in forgotten corners of British churchyards are more than just historical curiosities. They are powerful reminders of a time when the dead were not safe, and when the living were forced to guard them. It's a chilling chapter in the history of medicine, one that reveals the dark side of progress and the true price of knowledge. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the shadows of the past. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history's hidden corners, and let us know in the comments what piece of forgotten history you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next one.